Most families have one tradition that looks normal from the outside, but slowly grinds you down from the inside. Ours was Sunday dinner. Every week, it turned into a live-action scoreboard where my life was the losing column. By middle school, I could predict how bad the night would be just by the way my dad stacked plates or how my mom hovered around the stove with that fixed, excited smile. My older sister always sat at the special end of the table, right by the kitchen, like she was on stage. My parents would prop up her trophies and certificates along the edge of the table like a display, and then they'd start reading each one out loud. They'd pause for reactions. They'd brag. They'd clap. I'd stare at my plate, slicing my food into tiny pieces, trying to focus on breathing instead of that familiar burn in my chest. From the outside, it probably looked sweet, parents proud of their daughter. From my seat, it felt like a monthly reminder that I was the extra child the universe had accidentally shipped to the wrong house. Because there was always part two of the show. That was when my mom would tilt her head, sigh loudly, and say her favorite line. Why can't you be more like your sister? Like personalities were something you could just swap out and return if defective. One time, I tried to mention something I was actually proud of, a little program I was building on this ancient computer in the basement. I barely got the words out before my sister burst out laughing. She rolled her eyes. Messing around on a computer doesn't count as an achievement. My parents laughed with her, not because they understood what I was doing, just because their star child thought it was funny, so it had to be. My dad had exactly two settings with me: rage and ignoring. If I disagreed or tried to defend myself, he'd slam his hand on the table or shove his chair back so hard it screeched, and then launch into a speech about disrespect and how he would not be spoken to like that under his roof. If I stayed quiet, he could go days without acknowledging I existed. He'd walk past me in the hallway like I was a coat rack that happened to move. My mom didn't yell. She specialized in disappointed silence. Long sighs, long looks, and that same question over and over. Why can't you be more like your sister? Eventually, I stopped answering. There was no answer they wanted. The message was clear. I was the wrong daughter. The basement. The only place in that house that felt remotely safe was the basement. Not a cozy, finished basement. Concrete floor. Exposed pipes. Old boxes. A wobbly desk I rescued from someone's trash. Down there, they dumped a beat-up old desktop when they upgraded the family computer. That machine became my whole world. I taught myself to code down there, one tutorial and forum post at a time. Hours of trial and error. Typing, deleting, testing. Slowly, things started making sense. Down there, nobody asked why I wasn't more impressive. No one compared me to a wall of framed certificates. By the time I was college age, I went upstairs basically just to sleep. Everyone assumed I'd follow the script. Get into a good school, earn a respectable degree, become the polished adult my mom could brag about at barbecues. For a little while, I tried. I enrolled in computer science. It felt like the closest thing to the basement version of me. But sitting in huge lecture halls listening to professors ramble while hundreds of students typed half-hearted notes made me feel like I was drowning in noise. I didn't want imaginary projects and grades. I wanted to build something real. And eventually I snapped. The dinner where everything blew up. One Sunday night, when I was 19, I nuked whatever was left of my childhood role in that house. I waited until my dad finished reading my sister's latest list of accomplishments and my mom had given her usual "we are so blessed" speech. Then I said I was dropping out of college to build a software company with two people I'd met online. No warm-up, no soft landing. Just dropped it on the table. My dad went from calm to volcanic in seconds. He slammed his fist so hard a glass tipped and shattered. Then came the lecture. I was throwing away my future. Only irresponsible people quit college. No one in his house was going to be a lazy failure on his dime. My mom cried like I'd announced I was joining a cult. I did not raise a daughter to become an embarrassment, she repeated, over and over, worrying aloud about what people would say. My sister leaned against the doorway with a satisfied smile, like she'd seen this episode before and still loved it. "Of course this is happening," she muttered. "You never finish anything." That hurt more than the yelling. After the explosion, my dad switched into silent treatment mode. For days, he walked around me like I was a ghost. The only time he spoke was to say, "If you want to act like an adult and make your own decisions, figure out your life without us." I stayed because I had nowhere else to go yet, but it didn't feel like living there. It felt like being an unwanted relative they were legally stuck with. So I poured everything into the company, building in the dark. Our company at first was 3 people, 2 folding tables, hand-me-down monitors, a tiny room in a shared office that smelled like burnt coffee and carpet cleaner. And I loved it. I worked absurd hours, slept on a cheap mattress in the corner when I couldn't keep my eyes open, went home every few days just to shower and grab clothes. Whenever I came upstairs from the basement, I could feel my mom watching me like she was waiting for my phase to end. On the phone, she'd tell people she didn't know how much longer she could tolerate my little startup fantasy. While she said that, I was landing one tiny client, then another, then a local contract big enough to make my hands shake when I signed it. Some months I didn't pay myself at all, so we could hire one more developer or upgrade servers. I lived on microwave dinners and cheap ramen. But every working feature, every renewed contract felt like proof that I wasn't the useless, flaky person they decided I was. 5 years after that meltdown dinner, my life looked nothing like the version in their heads. We had about 40 employees, a couple of floors in a nicer building, clients appearing in regional news. A local business magazine did a piece on young tech founders and slapped my photo on a page I barely remembered posing for. I bought a small, creaky apartment in a not-fancy neighborhood that felt more like freedom than anywhere I'd ever lived. I didn't tell my parents. On paper, my official address was still their house. I left a suitcase and an old laptop in the basement on purpose because I knew my mom still went down there sometimes. I let her keep the illusion that I was stuck. Every few weeks, I'd show up for Sunday dinner to keep the peace. They'd ask how the job hunt was going. In their story, I was still hopping between part-time gigs. If I tried to mention a client or a project, my dad would cut in with a lecture about being realistic, and my mom would steer the conversation straight back to my sister's grad school and research. In real life, I was signing contracts and making payroll. At that table, I was still the disappointment who never lived up to her potential. I wasn't silent because I didn't care what they thought. I was silent because I knew exactly what they'd do with the truth. Twist it. So I let them keep their version of me and build my own in parallel. The night my sister announced her new job, the turning point came, like many of our family disasters, through one of my mom's group texts. "Special family dinner this Sunday. Your sister has big news." I almost ignored it. Those nights took days to recover from. But curiosity won. When I arrived, the table looked like it had been set for a ceremony. Candles, the good dishes, my mom buzzing with excitement. We all sat. My sister walked in wearing a blazer that screamed, "I'm about to make a speech," and holding a folder like an award. She said she had accepted a job at a tech company that had just gone through a big rebrand and now had a sleek, modern name. The second she said it, my brain lagged a beat and then caught up. It was my company. We'd spent months and too much money on that name. I smiled mechanically while my parents went into full performance mode. "So proud of you. This is what real effort gets you. A real, stable job." Then my dad turned to me, gave me that familiar disappointed look, and asked, in front of everyone, what my plan was now that my little experiment clearly wasn't going anywhere. He didn't wait for an answer. He told the whole table I was still living in their basement at 24, refusing to finish school, and living off their generosity. He said seeing my sister succeed had made him realize he couldn't carry me anymore. Then he said I had until that night to pack and leave. Being called a parasite by your own father in front of your family is not something you shrug off. Logically, it didn't harm me. I had my own apartment, my own income, my own life. The only thing he was really taking away was the illusion that they still had any control over me, but still landed. I didn't argue. I took my plate to the sink, told them I'd be gone by the end of the night. My mom tried to spin it as tough love that would finally make me grow up. I didn't bother correcting her. I went to the basement, grabbed a suitcase and ancient laptop I'd left as props, and walked out. I didn't tell them where I was going. Orientation day. The next morning, I reached the office early and went straight to HR. I asked for the list of new hires. There she was, my sister, onboarding this week. For a second, I considered staying out of it. Let her show up, do her job, and never connect the dots. That would have been the evolved choice. Instead, I told HR I'd be dropping into the new hire orientation to talk about company culture. At 9 a.m., the group was gathered around tables, badges clipped on, notepads ready. My sister sat near the front, facing the big screen. I walked in with my coffee. She looked over, saw me, and her face did a three-step dance. Confusion, amusement, smug amusement. "Oh my God," she said loudly. "You work here too? What, did they finally let you clean the place?" Laughter. Of course. They had no idea who I was. Heat rushed on my neck, and right behind it, a cold clarity. I turned to the HR manager, said her name. She stood a bit straighter. Body language shifted, very obviously. The room quieted. I set my coffee down and introduced myself the way I always do in those sessions. "My name is Bell. I'm the founder and CEO." You know that moment when everyone collectively stops breathing? That. People looked down. Someone gulped audibly. My sister just stared, mouth slightly open, like her brain had blue screened. I could have brushed it off, made a joke, eased her embarrassment. Instead, I calmly reminded everyone that we have a zero-tolerance policy toward disrespect and harassment, jokes included. Then I looked directly at my sister and said she owed the room an apology. For a second, I thought she'd refuse, but she stood up, voice shaky, and mumbled something about being out of line. I told HR to continue, asked my sister to see me in my office at the end of the day, and walked out, pretending my legs weren't trembling. Behind closed doors, I had to sit down before I could even open my laptop. Adrenaline crash is real. Sister, version 2. That afternoon, my sister stepped into my office looking like she'd aged a decade in a day. Puffy eyes, hair falling out of its neat style. I kept my tone professional. Her resume? Strong. She'd been hired on merit. Her comment that morning? Unacceptable regardless of who she said it to. But saying it to the person who owns the building? That crossed into self-sabotage. She started crying. She swore she'd had no idea. Thought I was some intern, maybe an assistant. Then she asked the question that stuck with me. "Why didn't you ever tell us? Me or mom or dad, any of it? Why let them talk about me like a failure while my face was in magazines?" I told her the closest thing to the truth I could manage without breaking down. They decided who I was a long time ago. Anytime I tried to show them something good, they dismissed it or turned it into criticism. It was easier to stay quiet than hand them something I was proud of and watch them tear it apart. I kept her job. Firing her on day one would have been a disaster for everyone. But I made sure she'd report to one of our toughest managers. No excuses. No special treatment. At work, I was her boss, not her sister. I also told her I wasn't going to be the one to enlighten our parents. If she wanted to tell them, that was her choice. 2 days later, they figured it out without her help. Parents at reception. Someone from their social circle had seen the article about young founders and connected the dots with my sister's new job. My parents marched into reception at my office without an appointment. You know that fake politeness older people put on when they're furious but want to look respectable? They had that turned up to max. My assistant buzzed me. Nervous. I took a minute, then told her to send them back. They walked into my office like they were inspecting a hotel room. My dad's face was red. My mom's eyes already glassy. Then he started. He called me a liar. Said I deceived them. Humiliated them by letting them believe for years that I was a failure while secretly running a company. He claimed they'd always believed in my potential and that I had betrayed their trust. Listening to him rewrite our history in real time was almost impressive. I asked him to name one time. Just once, he'd asked about my work without mocking it. I reminded them of all the dinners where any sentence I started was cut off so they could brag about my sister. How not once, in all the years I'd been holed up in that basement, did either of them come down and say, "Show me what you're building." My mom tried to go into sentimental mode about family, sharing blessings, how hurt she was that strangers knew more about my life than they did. So I asked her to name 3 basic things about me that weren't tied to my sister or that house. She guessed my favorite color. Wrong. Favorite food. Wrong again. Then ran out of guesses. My dad switched to his "let's move forward" speech. We should put this behind us and be a united family now. I told them they'd had decades to be a family. They chose comparison and performance instead. I walked them back to reception myself and told them they were not to show up unannounced again. If they wanted to talk, they could call like everyone else. For a few weeks, there was silence. They asked. Then my mom came alone. She had a folder. Bank statements. Loan papers. Notices. My dad's business was collapsing. Bad deals. Overdue payments. They were on the edge of losing everything. She said the only realistic way out was a big loan from me, or me opening doors to save his business. Your father worked his whole life, she said. He doesn't deserve this. Family helps family. I reminded her that same family had called me a parasite and kicked me out weeks earlier. I pointed out he'd had 30 years as the respected business owner, while I built something in a basement no one cared about. I told her I wasn't going to risk my company or empty my accounts for the man who never believed in me when it mattered. Her tone switched from pleading to guilt. She warned people would call me cold. That money had changed me. That one day, I'd regret not helping them. I told her she could say whatever she wanted to whoever she wanted, but I wasn't going to fund a rewrite of our past. After she left, I blocked both their numbers. Told reception they were not to be let in without my explicit consent. It felt brutal. It also felt like closing a door that had been banging in my head for years. They lost the business, sold the house I'd grown up in, and then they did what they always do, took the show on tour. They told everyone their hard-working father and fragile mother had been abandoned by their heartless, successful daughter. I was living in luxury while they struggled to eat. Relatives messaged me asking how I could do that to the people who raised you. One aunt left a long voicemail saying she hoped my future kids treated me exactly the way I treated my parents. I almost laughed, as if I was going to bring kids into this mess. My sister at work. As this was going on, my sister was turning into an HR headache. At work, she casually mentioned being related to the founder. Let coworkers assume it gave her leverage. Complained that she had to work twice as hard because of her last name. Told people I was jealous of her and trying to control her life with this job. HR eventually brought it to me. I listened. It stung more than I expected. I shifted her into a role with simple, repetitive tasks and close supervision. Not glamorous, but fair chance to improve. I told her plainly, one more stunt using our family dynamic equals termination. She was free to quit if she thought another company would treat her better. She stayed. A few months later, my parents came back again, this time calmer, which honestly scared me more. They said they'd started therapy, individually and together. They pulled out notes. Words like favoritism, harmful patterns, constant comparison. For the first time in my life, I heard my dad say, "We were wrong." I didn't melt. This wasn't a movie. I felt anger, fatigue, and a small, stubborn hope I hated myself for. They said they wanted another chance to know me. Me, not the version in their heads. I told them I'd try something, under strict terms. Meetings only in public places like coffee shops. Twice a month, 1 hour max. No visits to my home or office. No asking for money. No guilt speeches. Any rule broken, I walk. No discussions. They agreed. They had no leverage left. Coffee shop rules. Our first coffee felt like a job interview with strangers. They didn't know how to talk to me without lecturing. We talked weather, traffic, random news. They asked what I liked doing in my free time and looked genuinely surprised by basic facts. Over months, they slowly learned. I always hated half the meals my mom cooked, but never said it. My music taste was nowhere near what they'd assumed. I was not the angry, dramatic caricature they'd built. I kept it surface level. They wanted emotional closure. I wasn't ready to hand them that. Around the same time, my sister quit the company. She took an offer somewhere else, saying she needed to build an identity outside my shadow. She sent a stiff thank you email. I wrote a short, polite reply. Anything more would have been a lie. One visit, my parents tried to turn coffee into a therapy session. They started talking about regrets, sleepless nights, how badly they felt. I stopped them, reminded them of the rules. They pushed back. My dad said they'd done the work and deserved more openness. That word, deserved, hit a nerve. I told him calmly that he doesn't get to decide what emotional access he's owed. Not anymore. I think that was when he finally grasped that the power balance had shifted for good. Later, my mom went back to her old pattern, complaining in public. She posted a long, vague story online about an ungrateful child who refused to let her own parents see her home, punish them forever despite their efforts, etc. She didn't mention my name. She didn't have to. Someone sent me a screenshot. Next coffee meet. I put the phone down on the table with the post pulled up, hands shaking. This time from anger, I told them the experiment was over. They'd taken our private mess back to the audience, like always. I was done. No more coffee shop visits. No more scheduled talks. Silence again. But this time it felt clean, rewriting my own rules. I bury myself in work. We grew, opened a satellite office, hired more people. I built a new circle, friends who never knew my parents, who knew me as capable, funny, stubborn, messy but trying, not the wrong daughter. Therapy helped me name things I'd always called normal. Like the night my dad kicked me out. I described what happened, step by step, to my therapist. Where I stood, what he said, how my mom reacted, how my ears rang and my hands went numb, how I still packed neatly because I was afraid of adding messy to the list of accusations. She listened and then said, "That sounds like a trauma response." For years, I told myself I was just too sensitive, that they loved me in their way. Hearing someone call it what was broke something loose inside me, I started realizing how often I repeated their patterns with other people, using silence as punishment, clenching when criticized, bracing for comparisons. So I made rules for myself as a boss. No using comparison as a weapon. No humiliating people in front of others. No turning cold silence into control. I failed at that sometimes, but at least now I notice it, and I correct course. Distance, not a fairy tale. My parents downsized to a small rental and settled into this strange role. Not quite estranged, not truly close. My sister sends short holiday texts. Hope you're well. I reply with similar politeness. We don't rehash the past. The people in our old community still see me as the villain. The rich, selfish daughter who abandoned her poor parents. I stopped trying to change that story. It's not written for me. Over time, I realized something important. You can care whether your parents are alive without giving them full access to your life. You can acknowledge they shaped you without letting them keep writing your story. I don't have a cinematic ending for you. No miraculous change of heart. No big family Christmas reunion. No. And then we all heal montage. What I have is distance. Boundaries. A life where no one is waiting upstairs to turn my achievements into a comparison. No one is asking why I'm not more like my sister. No one can throw me out of a house I own. Sometimes my sister mentions them. Small updates about their health, neighbors, hobbies. I respond neutrally and go back to my day. I'm not their hero. I'm not their villain. I'm just not their project anymore. They still tell their version of the story. This is mine. And for the first time in my life, that feels like enough.